She was 28 years old and, for all intents and purposes, homeless. She had no family left to speak of, no clear plan, and a worn leather purse containing $52. With 10 of those dollars, she bought a bolted iron bank vault in the high mountain town of Redemption, Colorado. But what nobody knew was that sealed inside its war-era lock was a history that would give her back a future. Settle in close with us for this one. And in the comments, let us know where you're watching from tonight. Hannah Arkwright had learned the world through the language of mechanisms. Her late husband, Thomas, had been a watchmaker, a man whose quiet genius lay in the patient arrangement of gears and springs. He had not been a man of grand pronouncements or easy affections, but he had loved her with a steady, ticking precision. He had come to Redemption not for gold, but for the clean, dry air that was supposed to be kind to his lungs. For 5 years it had been. In their small clapboard house behind the shop, he had taught her to see the intricate dance of parts that made a whole. He would hold up an escapement wheel, its brass teeth impossibly fine, and explain how it arrested and released the energy of the mainspring, turning raw power into measured time. "Everything has a system, Hannah," he'd say, his voice soft as chamois leather. "You just have to be patient enough to see it." He taught her how to use a jeweler's loop, how to clean a pivot with a pegwood slip, how to feel the right tension in a hairspring. She learned the names of tools, pinvezes, staking sets, mainspring winders. Her hands, though slender, became steady and sure. The beloved object she carried, now tucked in a soft deerskin pouch in her pocket, was the first perfect escapement wheel she had ever crafted under his tutelage, a tiny brass sunburst he had declared finer than his own. His death, when it came, was not sudden but a slow winding down, like a timepiece running out of power. It was consumption that took him, stealing his breath until there was none left. She was 27 when she became a widow, adrift in the silence of a house where nothing ticked anymore. Her position in the town, once respectable as the watchmaker's wife, became fragile, uncertain. She was a woman alone, a fact that seemed to invite either pity or predation, and she wanted neither. The most vital part of the system that had been her life was Thomas's older brother, Elias Arkwright. He was a man built of ledgers and contracts, where Thomas had been built of brass and steel. Elias arrived from Denver 2 weeks after the funeral, his face set in an expression of grim but necessary duty. He had never approved of his brother's choice to be a simple craftsman in a mountain town, and he had certainly never approved of Hannah, whom he saw as little more than a piece of the rustic scenery Thomas had unfortunately acquired. For a month, Elias went over the books, his pen scratching late into the night. Hannah kept to the small house, maintaining the quiet order Thomas had cherished, polishing the tools that now lay dormant. She knew what was coming. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, with the air crisp and smelling of pine. Elias called her into the shop, not to the house. He had her sit on a stool, while he remained standing behind the counter where Thomas had worked. "Hannah," he began, his tone devoid of warmth, "the accounts are in a sorry state. Thomas was a fine artisan, but a poor businessman. There are debts." He gestured to a stack of papers she knew to be a fiction. Thomas had been meticulous, almost pathologically so. After settling his affairs, Elias continued, his gaze fixed somewhere over her head. "There is very little left. The shop, the house, they will have to be sold to cover the liabilities." He paused, letting the administrative coldness of his words settle in the air. He was not a monster. He was simply a man for whom profit was the only legible metric of success, and sentiment was a variable to be discarded. He pushed a single sheet of paper and a small stack of bills across the counter. "I have, however, managed to secure this for you, out of respect for my brother's memory." The paper was a quitclaim, her signature releasing any and all rights to the property and business. The money was $52. It was not a negotiation. It was an ejection, delivered with the impersonal cruelty of a legal notice. Hannah looked at the crisp bills, then at the pen he offered her. She did not argue. She did not plead or weep. Arguing with Elias would be like arguing with a stone wall. She took the pen its nib scratching faintly as she signed her name, the Inca dark final mark on the page. She stood, her movements deliberate and contained. "I will need an hour to gather my things," she said, her voice even. Elias gave a curt nod. "Be quick about it." She walked back to the little house, the place where she had learned about love and levers, and packed a single carpet bag with 2 dresses, her sewing kit, a block of soap, and the deerskin pouch containing the brass escapement wheel. She did not look back as she closed the door for the last time. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the final tick of a life that was now over. She was Hannah Arkwright, 28, a widow with $52 and a single bag, walking away from the only home she had known. Her journey was not one of miles, but of steps that measured the vast social distance between being a wife and being a widow with no means. The walk from the watchmaker's shop on Aspen Street to the Widow Gant's boarding house on the less reputable edge of town took only 15 minutes. But in that time, Hannah felt her entire world reconfigure. The town of Redemption, which had once felt like a small, interconnected community, now seemed a landscape of judging eyes and closed doors. She saw Mrs. Gable, the baker's wife, sweep her porch with sudden, intense focus as Hannah approached. Her gaze fixed firmly on the dustpan. Mr. Abernathy, who ran the mercantile, gave her a tight-paned nod from behind his window display of canned peaches and flannel shirts. A look that was equal parts pity and a desire not to get involved. She felt the weight of their assumptions, that she was destitute, that she was now a burden, another solitary woman for the town to worry about. Her boots, well-made and sturdy, a gift from Thomas, made a steady, lonely sound on the boardwalk. The air, usually a tonic, felt thin and sharp in her lungs. She focused on the physical sensations to keep the tremor from her hands, the rough texture of the carpetbag's handle, the slight chill of the autumn wind against her cheeks, the solid weight of the $52 in her purse. It was a tangible anchor in a sea of uncertainty. The Widow Gant's boarding house was a tall, stern-looking building with peeling gray paint and a permanent smell of boiled cabbage and damp wool. Mrs. Gant herself was a woman carved from hardship, her face a roadmap of past sorrows. She looked Hannah over with an appraising eye that missed nothing. "A week in advance," she said, her voice flat. "No gentlemen callers. Meals are at 7 and 6. Don't be late." Hannah counted out $3 and placed them in the woman's outstretched palm. The room she was given was on the 3rd floor, small and spare, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over a muddy alley. The moment the door closed behind her, the composure she had maintained so rigidly since leaving Elias's presence finally fractured. She did not cry, but a deep, shuddering breath escaped her. She sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and opened her bag. She took out the deerskin pouch and let the small brass escapement wheel fall into her palm. It was a perfect, intricate thing, a testament to order and patience. She closed her hand around it, its sharp teeth pressing into her skin, a small, grounding pain. For the next 2 days, she stayed in that room, leaving only for the silent, grim meals downstairs. She was conserving her energy, her money, her hope. She was thinking. Thomas had taught her to look at a broken thing not as a failure, but as a puzzle. Her life was a broken thing. She needed to understand its system, to find the one part she could engage to make it move again. On the 3rd day, she walked into town, not as a supplicant, but as an observer. She needed to know the town's own mechanism, its needs and its waste. It was then, standing near the town hall, that she overheard 2 councilmen talking. "It's an eyesore," one complained. "Been there since the bank failed in '65. We'd have to dynamite it to get it out. Scrap price won't even cover the powder," the other grumbled. "And no one can get the damn door open. Bolted shut since the war." They were talking about the old granite and pine bank, a squat stone building that had been abandoned for a decade, and inside it, a vault, a sealed, immovable box, a puzzle. Something in Hannah, the part of her that Thomas had nurtured, sparked to life. She saw not an eyesore, but a challenge. A mechanism waiting for a patient hand. The Town Council of Redemption met every other Thursday in the main room of the town hall, a space that smelled of stale cigar smoke and unvarnished ambition. Hannah entered quietly and took a seat on a bench at the back, her presence going largely unnoticed among the usual assortment of petitioners and busybodies. She smoothed the skirt of her plain gray dress and folded her hands in her lap, her posture one of calm observation. The meeting droned on, a litany of minor disputes over water rights and stray livestock. Finally, Mayor Thompson, a man whose girth was a testament to his prosperity, brought up the final item on the agenda. And that brings us to the matter of the old granite and pine bank building. Specifically, the vault. A collective groan went through the room. As you know, the mayor continued, the structure is a public hazard, and we voted to have it dismantled. But the vault remains. It is, by all accounts, immovable and impenetrable. We've had 2 blacksmiths look at it. No luck. The cost of blasting it out and hauling the scrap is estimated at nearly $100. He paused for effect. Therefore, the council proposes we simply wall it up within the new structure. It was at this moment that Hannah stood. Her movement was so quiet and unexpected that it drew every eye in the room. "Mr. Mayor," she said, her voice clear and steady, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Mayor Thompson peered at her over his spectacles. "Mrs. Arkwright, we are sorry for your loss. It was a dismissive courtesy. What is it?" "You wish to be rid of the vault," Hannah stated, "not as a question, but as a fact. I will take it off your hands." A ripple of confused murmuring spread through the room. The mayor blinked. "Take it? My dear woman, you misunderstand. It cannot be moved. I am not proposing to move it," she clarified. "I am proposing to buy it. As is, where is." A few men chuckled. Elias Arkwright, sitting near the front with the town's other prominent businessmen, shot her a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. He thought this was some pathetic, desperate stunt. "Buy it?" The mayor scoffed. "It's a 10-ton block of useless iron." "Nevertheless," Hannah said, her gaze unwavering, "I will buy it. For $10. The room, which had been murmuring, fell silent for a beat, and then erupted in laughter. It was not a kind sound. It was the derisive, hearty laughter of men who saw a foolish woman making a spectacle of herself. $10 for a sealed box no one could open. It was the joke of the year. Hannah did not flinch. She simply waited for the noise to subside, her expression unchanged. The mayor, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye, saw an opportunity. He could solve his problem and publicly underscore the woman's folly at the same time. "Sold," he declared, slamming his gavel down with a flourish. "To the widow Arkwright, for $10. Let the record show the town is absolved of any further responsibility for the object." He had the town clerk, a mousy man named Peters, hastily scratch out a bill of sale on a scrap of paper. Hannah walked to the front of the room, the silence now thick with mockery. She counted out a $10 bill and 2 silver dollars from her purse, then corrected herself, taking back the silver and laying only the single bill on the table. She had $42 left. She took the slip of paper. It was her deed. She now owned a sealed iron vault. The next morning she went to see it. The bank building was a stone shell, its roof open to the sky. But the vault stood in the back corner like an ancient, defiant monolith. It was immense, 7 feet tall and 6 feet wide, its face a solid plate of dark iron, pocked with rust but showing no sign of weakness. The door was a masterpiece of security, its edges fitting into the frame with no discernible gap. A single complex dial, its numbers faded, sat above a large frozen handle. Thick, round-headed rivets, hundreds of them, studded its surface like iron barnacles. It was formidable, silent, and utterly sealed. Hannah ran her bare hand over the cold metal. It was not an eyesore. It was beautiful. It was a promise of a secret, a fortress of solitude. It was hers. To solve a puzzle of this magnitude, Hannah knew she needed more than patience. She needed leverage and specialized knowledge. There was only one man in Redemption who possessed both: Daniel Hollis, the town blacksmith. Daniel was a widower himself, a quiet, capable man who had served as a mechanic with the Union Army, repairing cannons and wagon trains. He understood the brute force of iron and the subtle persuasion of heat and oil. His forge was at the other end of town, a place of rhythmic hammering and the clean, sharp smell of hot metal and coal smoke. Hannah found him there, his powerful frame silhouetted against the glowing heart of the forge as he shaped a horseshoe. He worked with an economy of motion that spoke of deep expertise. He looked up as she approached, his face, usually serious, softening slightly. He had known Thomas and had respected him. "Mrs. Arkwright," he said, his voice a low rumble. He quenched the horseshoe in a trough of water, and the resulting hiss seemed to suck the noise out of the air, leaving a sudden quiet. "I need your help, Mr. Hollis," Hannah said simply. She did not offer excuses or elaborate stories. She just stated her purpose. "I have purchased the old bank vault. I intend to open it." Daniel wiped his hands on a leather apron, his expression thoughtful. He did not laugh. He did not even seem surprised. He just nodded slowly. "I've seen it. It's a stubborn piece of work." "A Harman Latimer Model 3, built to withstand a siege. You know the make?" Hannah asked, a flicker of hope igniting within her. "We had a few guarding paymasters' tents during the war," he said. "Never saw one breached." He looked at her, his gaze direct and serious. "It won't be easy." "I'm not looking for easy," she replied. "I'm looking for possible." A small, rare smile touched Daniel's lips. "All right then, let's go have a look at the puzzle." They walked to the ruined bank together, Daniel carrying a heavy wooden toolbox. For the next week, the site became their workshop. The town watched with amusement. Men would stop by on their way to the saloon, offering mock advice. "Need a bigger hammer, Hollis," or "should have just bought a shovel, ma'am, and dug for gold." Hannah ignored them. Daniel ignored them. They were a silent island of purpose in a sea of ridicule. Daniel's approach was methodical. First, they cleaned. They spent a whole day with wire brushes and rags, scraping away a decade of rust and grime from the door's seams and the face of the lock. Daniel then began to apply a penetrating oil of his own concoction, a mixture of kerosene and lard, letting it seep into the infinitesimal cracks around the hinges and the dial. While the oil did its slow work, they studied the mechanism. Daniel, tapping gently with a small hammer, listened to the sounds. "The tumblers are inside," he explained, pointing to the dial. "At least 5, I'd wager. They have to be aligned just so for the bolt to draw back." Hannah, using her jeweler's loupe, examined the faint markings on the dial. They were not numbers, she realized, but finely etched symbols: a star, a crescent moon, a gear, a feather, a key. The sequence was the problem. On the third day, Daniel brought levers, long, heavy iron bars. With painstaking care, they tried to get the slightest purchase on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was directly linked to the internal bolts, which were firmly locked in place. The solution had to come from the dial. For days, they tried combinations, turning the dial with a heavy wrench Daniel had forged. Left 4 turns to the star. Right 3 to the gear. The process was agonizingly slow. Each failure was met not with frustration, but with quiet reassessment. They worked in a comfortable silence, passing tools back and forth, their shared focus a language of its own. On the evening of the 7th day, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange, Hannah had an idea. She was looking at the symbols again with her loupe. "Thomas always said the answer is usually in the system itself," she murmured, more to herself than to Daniel. She thought about the name of the bank, Granite and Pine. An odd name. She traced the symbols: star, moon, gear, feather, key. What if it wasn't a code, but a story? A sequence of ideas? On a hunch, she spoke the sequence aloud. A key, she began, touching the last symbol. To a gear, she moved to the third, that turns the world. But that didn't feel right. She started again, this time with the bank's name. Granite, pine, rock and tree. Nature, the moon, she said, turning the dial slowly to the right, and the star. She paused. The feather of a bird in a pine tree. And the key, she stopped. The key was man-made. The gear was man-made. What if the natural symbols came first? Moon, right 2 turns, she instructed. Daniel put the wrench on the dial. Star, left 3 turns. Feather, right 1 turn. With each turn there was a faint metallic scrape, but nothing more. They had tried dozens of combinations. This felt no different. Now the man made things, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The gear. Left 2 turns. Daniel grunted with the effort. And finally, the key. Right, until it stops. He began the final turn. The dial moved, and then, with a deep, resonant clack that echoed in the stone shell of the building, something massive inside the door shifted. They both froze. The sound was followed by a series of smaller clicks, like bones settling. A low groan. Daniel slowly removed the wrench. He reached out and grasped the big iron handle. He pulled. At first, nothing, then, with a scream of metal on metal that scraped at their very bones, the hinges, frozen for a decade, began to move. The great iron door swung inward, revealing a cavern of perfect, silent darkness. The air that flowed out was stale but dry, smelling of old paper, leather, and time itself. Inside, standing on a low wooden shelf, was a stack of leather-bound ledgers and a small, plain tin box. Hannah stepped across the threshold, her heart pounding a rhythm of fear and triumph. She reached out and picked up the tin box. It was unlocked. Inside was a small, heavy cloth bag, a single, unadorned silver dollar, and a folded letter. She opened the letter, its paper crisp and dry. The handwriting was neat, precise. To whomever finds this, it began. My name is Silas Croft. I was the proprietor of this bank. If you are reading this, I am long dead, and my partner, a man named Alistair Finch, has likely succeeded in his ruinous plans. He used the bank to issue fraudulent loans and alter deeds, cheating honest men out of their land. These ledgers, the letter continued, are the true records. The ones in the town hall are forgeries. I could not fight him and win, so I created this final record, a puzzle I hoped only a patient and honest soul might solve. The money in the bag is my personal savings, $300 in gold coin. It is not a treasure, it is a tool. Use it to do what is right. The silver dollar is for you. May it bring you better fortune than it brought me. I sealed this door on May 12, 1865. I pray you are the person I hoped would come. Hannah looked up at Daniel, his face illuminated by the last rays of the setting sun. She held the letter in her hand. It was not gold or jewels she had found. It was something far more valuable. It was proof. It was a weapon. It was a charge to keep. The weight of Silas Croft's trust felt heavier than the $300 in gold coin. That night, Hannah did not return to the boarding house. With Daniel's help, she moved a small cot and a lamp into the vault, its thick iron walls a bastion against the prying eyes of the town. The massive door, now obedient on its freshly oiled hinges, was closed but not bolted. By the light of the lamp, they sat on the floor and opened the first ledger. The pages were filled with the same precise, careful hand as the letter. Each entry was a story of trust and betrayal. They saw the name of Jebediah Stone, a farmer who had taken a $200 loan for seed, and whose deed was marked as foreclosed, though the ledger showed he had paid it back in full, with interest, 2 years prior. They saw the name of the widow, Maeve O'Connell, whose small mining claim, which had yielded a modest but steady income, was shown to be signed over to a holding company owned by Alistair Finch for a pittance she had never received. Name after name, the pattern was the same. Mortgages paid, but recorded as defaulted. deeds transferred under false pretenses. The architecture of the town's poverty was laid bare. The beneficiaries were a small circle of men, their names recurring again and again: Alistair Finch, who had long since fled, and his local associates, Mayor Thompson, and to Hannah's cold, unsurprised shock, Elias Arkwright. Her brother-in-law had not just cast her out. He had built his prosperity on the stolen foundations of his neighbors' lives. Her personal grievance was now part of a much larger injustice. Daniel, his face grim in the lamplight, pointed to a name: Angus MacLeod. He lost his ranch 5 years ago, drank himself to death a year later. His wife and son left town with nothing. The name was in the book. His debt marked paid 6 months before the bank seized his land. The rebuilding began not with a confrontation, but with a quiet visit. The next morning, Hannah walked out to the Stone Farm, 3 miles east of town. She found Jebediah Stone, a man stooped and weathered by worry, trying to fix a broken fence line. His wife, Martha, watched from the porch of their small, unpainted cabin. Hannah introduced herself and, without preamble, opened the ledger to his page. "Mr. Stone," she said gently, "I believe the Granite and Pine Bank owes you an apology. And your deed." The farmer stared at the entry, his eyes tracing the record of his payments. He looked at Hannah, then at the book, then back at Hannah, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning, tearful hope. He called for his wife. Martha came, wiped her hands on her apron, and peered at the ledger. She read it, then looked at Hannah, her gaze sharp and assessing. She saw no guile, only a quiet woman holding a book of truth. That evening, Martha Stone arrived at the vault with a basket. Inside was a hot stew, a loaf of fresh bread, and a jar of apple butter. She said nothing, just placed the basket inside the door, gave Hannah a firm, grateful nod, and left. It was the first brick laid in the foundation of a new community. Word traveled not like a fire, but like water seeping into dry ground. Jebediah Stone told his neighbor, who told his brother-in-law. 2 days later, a miner named Finn, whose claim had been stolen, appeared at the vault. He was followed by a rancher's son, clutching the forged foreclosure notice that had broken his father. One by one, they came. Hannah did not make pronouncements. She simply opened the ledger and showed them the truth. Daniel was a constant, silent presence. He did not interfere with the records, but he made the vault a place of work and safety. He repaired the broken hinge with a perfectly fitted iron brace. He built sturdy shelves from reclaimed pine boards to hold the ledgers. He installed a small wood stove in the corner, its chimney expertly routed through a ventilation shaft in the ceiling, turning the cold iron box into a warm, functional space. His loyalty was not spoken. It was demonstrated in the solid thud of his hammer, in the way he stood by the door, a bulwark of quiet strength that discouraged the curious and the hostile. The community was coalescing through shared work, the painstaking labor of matching Silas Croft's true records against the town's false history. The vault, once a symbol of Hannah's folly, slowly transformed into the moral and logistical center of redemption. People no longer called it Arkwright's folly. They called it the records office. Hannah's name, once whispered with pity or scorn, was now spoken with a profound and quiet respect. She was no longer just the watchmaker's widow. She was the woman who had opened the book of truth. Her days settled into a new, purposeful rhythm. In the morning, she would rise from her cot, light the small stove Daniel had installed, and put on a pot of coffee. The smell, rich and warming, would fill the iron-walled room. Then the people would begin to arrive. They would wait patiently outside, hats in hand, their faces etched with the anxieties of years of injustice, but now lit with a fragile flame of hope. Hannah would greet each one, invite them into the warmth of the vault, and listen. She would find their name in Silas Croft's meticulous ledgers, show them the proof of their payment or the true terms of their deed, and then help them draft the necessary papers to file a claim with the circuit judge. who was due to arrive in the spring. She used the gold coins Silas had left not for herself, but to establish a small fund to help with filing fees and to provide sustenance for those who had to travel to the county seat. Daniel's forge became an extension of the records office. He would shoe a farmer's horse for a portion of what other men charged, or repair a tool for a promise of future payment, easing the burdens of the people Hannah was helping. His presence was a quiet endorsement that carried more weight than any mayoral decree. The community began to weave itself around her. Martha Stone brought a hot meal every other day. Finn, the miner whose claim was restored, brought a sack of coal for her stove each week. A young woman named Sarah, whose father's name was in the ledger, offered to help with the paperwork, her neat handwriting a welcome aid. People began to leave small things on the vault's threshold: a jar of honey, a pair of knitted wool socks, a freshly caught trout wrapped in damp leaves. These were not payments. They were tokens of a shared struggle and a collective gratitude. The inevitable confrontation with Mayor Thompson and Elias Arkwright was as quiet and devastating as an avalanche starting with a single stone. They appeared one afternoon, their faces thunderous. "This is a public nuisance," Thompson blustered, gesturing at the small crowd waiting outside the vault. "You are peddling fantasy and disrupting the peace." Elias stepped forward, his eyes cold. "You are a hysterical woman, Hannah. Thomas would be ashamed." Hannah did not rise to the bait. She simply held up the ledger, opened to the page detailing the fraudulent transfer of the McLeod Ranch to a company half-owned by Elias. "The circuit judge will find this very interesting reading, Elias," she said, her voice calm and clear. "As will the families of the men you've ruined, Mayor." They saw the truth in her eyes, and the crowd of determined faces behind her. They saw that their power, built on lies, was dissolving against the unyielding iron of the vault and the paper records it held. They did not argue further. They turned and left, and within a month, both men had sold their assets at a loss and departed from redemption under a cloud of disgrace. Hannah Arkwright had become the town's anchor. The vault was no longer a cold iron box. It was a living place, filled with the warmth of the stove, the smell of coffee, and the quiet murmur of people reclaiming their lives. Daniel built her a proper desk from a massive slab of polished pine and a sturdy chair to go with it. One evening, as they sat in comfortable silence, he looked around the small, orderly space. "Silas Croft would be proud," he said. It was the highest praise he could offer. Hannah looked at the rows of ledgers, at the steady flame in the stove, and felt a sense of belonging more profound than any she had ever known. This place, this unwanted, forgotten thing, had become her purpose. A year had passed. Snow fell outside the open door of the vault, thick, silent flakes drifting down into the twilight, muffling the sounds of the town. Inside, a gentle warmth radiated from the small wood stove, its iron belly glowing a dull cherry red. The air was filled with the scent of burning pine, drying ink, and the faint, clean smell of old paper. Hannah Arkwright sat at the handsome pine desk Daniel had built for her, a cup of steaming coffee warming her hands. The vault was no longer a cavern of darkness, but a compact and meticulously organized office. The shelves Daniel had made were neatly filled with the restored ledgers, alongside new books where she now recorded corrected deeds and settled accounts. An oil lamp cast a steady golden light over the room, glinting off the brass nameplate Daniel had affixed to the door: Redemption Records and Reconciliation. She was 29 years old, and she was home. In one hand, she held the small, intricate brass escapement wheel her husband Thomas had praised as perfect. Its teeth were sharp and precise, a testament to the order he had taught her to see in the world, the belief that every system, no matter how complex, could be understood. In her other hand, she held the single, unadorned silver dollar left to her by Silas Croft. It was smooth and heavy, worn by time and worry. It was a token from a man she had never met, a stranger who had placed his faith in the integrity of another stranger yet to come. She thought of the two men, the watchmaker and the banker. Thomas had taught her how to look at a locked thing and see a puzzle. Silas had built the puzzle and trusted that someone like her would arrive. They were the architects of her new life. Two quiet men whose legacies of patience and principle had converged in this small iron room. She placed the brass gear and the silver dollar side by side on her desk. They looked right together, two small, solid pieces of a life rebuilt. Outside, she heard the crunch of boots in the snow. Daniel Hollis appeared in the doorway, shaking the snow from his hat. He carried 2 tin plates piled with roasted chicken and potatoes from the evening meal at the Newtown boarding house, now run by Martha Stone. He set one plate on the corner of Hannah's desk and took a seat on the stool he kept near the stove. He didn't need to ask how her day was. He had been a part of it, helping a newly returned family fix the axle on their wagon. Their lives, like the parts of a watch, had become intertwined, moving in a shared, steady rhythm. He looked at her, a quiet question in his eyes. She gave him a small, genuine smile. The men who had underestimated her, who had cast her out with administrative cruelty, Elias, Mayor Thompson, were gone, their names now cautionary tales. The people who had laughed were now the ones who sought her counsel. The community, once fractured by deceit, was slowly healing, its trust being rebuilt one true record at a time. Hannah Arkwright was 29 and had once had only $10 to her name. She had spent it on an abandoned, sealed iron vault. It was the best $10 she had ever spent. The story of Hannah Arkwright reminds us that what one person discards as useless scrap, another can see as the very key to a new beginning. Her patience and belief in the value of overlooked things didn't just open a door, it reopened a town's history and gave its people back their future. Thank you for sitting with us for her story. If you were moved by her quiet strength, we hope you'll subscribe and share this with someone who might need it. We leave you with this thought. What is the bolted vault in your own life? The thing others have given up on that might just be waiting for a patient hand? Let us know in the comments below. We read every one.